Right, that was kind of amazing. The minute they said recording started, everyone just naturally went silent. Well, welcome. Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to have you all here in the bank with us. I'm Laura Choi. I lead the bank's public engagement group. And again, we're just so delighted to have all of you here today. This event, Fueling an Inclusive Economy, the Role of Employment Social Services. This is actually our first hybrid event that we've done here in the bank since the pandemic. So we're especially excited for this opportunity to have this in-person discussion as well as engagement with our folks online. So thank you for joining us. I also want to especially thank our partner REDF, whose vision and collaboration made today's event possible. So thank you. Here at the San Francisco Fed, we're dedicated to building an economy that works for everyone and helping to ensure that all Americans, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, geography, ability, or socioeconomic status, have the opportunity to fully realize their potential. So all of you have probably heard news reports about how we're experiencing low unemployment rates across the country, and you've probably seen signs in your own neighborhood small businesses. These businesses are looking for workers with for hire signs hanging in the windows. Yet despite these signs, many Americans remain on the sidelines of the economy due to employment barriers, such as a lack of stable housing or prior involvement in the justice system. And according to a 2017 estimate, 10 million people are sidelined from the economy, facing barriers to work, such as homelessness, justice system involvement, and mental illness. So by pursuing the Fed's two key goals of maximum employment and price stability, which some of you may have heard as the Fed's dual mandate, we work to ensure that our economy and every American can reach their full potential. And so that's why today's discussion in particular is so important to the work that we do. So understanding the various business models and business practices that remove barriers to employment and connect individuals currently not participating in the labor force with quality jobs contributes to our efforts to promote a sound and stable economy. And by understanding workers' recent experiences in the labor market, in and out of the labor market, we have more ideas on how to build an inclusive economy that works for everyone. So I'll end here by again thanking you for joining us today for this important discussion about building models for a more inclusive economy. I'd now like to turn the floor over to my colleague Jessica Coria, who serves as Regional Outreach Manager for Southern California, and she'll lead our next panel. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you so much, Laura. We really appreciate you being here. And now I want to introduce my colleague, Sarah Miller, Principal Advisor, Community and Economic Development at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. We're going to have a conversation about a project that she has worked on for the past 2 years. That's really amazing. All right. So today, Sarah, we're going to talk about the Worker Voices Project, which I know is a first of its kind research effort by the Federal Reserve System to capture that full picture of the labor market. And looking beyond the numbers, because we have a lot of data, but it's usually numerical in nature. So tell us, why was this important to the Fed?
Yeah, well, thanks. And first of all, good morning. It's great to be in person with all of you and with the virtual room as well. So let me give it just a bigger frame and pull us back a little bit. So the research that Jessica's that we'll talk more about and then we'll make sure it gets into your hands was really conducted between May and September of 2022. But if we pull even further back to when the economy started to reopen and we started to see the rise of the labor shortage, this was in the news everywhere. I'm sure you heard it. We were all bombarded with this at 6 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, whatever your news hour of choice may be. Unemployment was at historical lows. There was 2 job openings to every 1 job seeker. Why are people not coming back? Were they disincented by expanded unemployment, by stimulus dollars? These were questions that we were wrestling with internally because, as Jessica mentioned, we look at a lot of quantitative data, but it also is lagging data. It's data that's looking backwards. It's data that's faceless. It's data that is not necessarily disaggregated for us to really understand what's happening for the populations, especially that we're trying to serve, as Laura noted, those that still have persistent barriers to labor force participation. And my co-lead on this, who is out of the Philadelphia Fed, said, let's just talk with workers. We do all of this talking with businesses to really understand their conditions and what they need and their talent challenges, but we don't necessarily do a great job of talking en masse and systemically to the workers that we aim to serve. So let's just talk with them and hear how they are faring in the economy, what's keeping them from coming back to work, what are they looking for, what were their experiences, and how is that influencing their behavior in the job market. So that's why we wanted to do this. At the Atlanta Fed as well holds the same principles as the San Francisco Fed. We aim to create an economy that works for everyone, and really understanding what was going on, what did they need, how is the economy serving them or not serving them in this very historic kind of response to the initial economic shocks of the pandemic. Let's talk with workers directly and get a better understanding that can color the otherwise kind of humanless data that we, consume en masse across the Federal Reserve System.
That's great. So who did you talk to? How did you go about doing this?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a little bit more of the broader mechanics. So this quickly turned into, as many things do if you work in organizations that have a number of different affiliates and you're trying to coordinate a lot of work when it's coming out of the idea of just smaller places. We didn't know what kind of interest we were going to get across the Federal Reserve System. So like I said, it was me and my colleague in Philly. We're going to do this. Let's figure it out. And ultimately, it grew from, we'll have a couple of conversations to, oh my gosh, have to have 20 conversations because every single Federal Reserve Bank said, we're in, we need to know this too, let us know what we can do. So we started to set, how did we kind of construct the research? And we wanted to understand what was happening to workers that have the higher barriers and that have lower economic mobility. So those that don't have the safety net of a bachelor's degree. That was truly our main inclusion criteria. So if you held less than a bachelor's degree and you were within the prime age of the working cohort, so between 20 to 55 for our purposes, because we had a kind of a historical arc to our question set, that's who we wanted to talk to. But we had to leverage our community relationships. So people in the room like you that work directly with workers or that work with worker serving agencies, because we don't necessarily have this list handy of all of the workers and residents or job seekers that are out there that we can talk with. So we reached out. I think we ended up working through 60 some odd community-based providers all across the country and ultimately talked with 175 workers across 20 focus groups. The workers represented 33 different states and 147 different zip codes. So we had a really good mix on all of the demographic factors, rural, urban, suburban, people from blue states and red states, of course, all across the country, and a number of different sectors. I would say disproportionately so, the workers that we talked to were those in essential roles, what we would call essential roles, working, having to work paycheck to paycheck, not really having that benefit to work remotely when the pandemic hit, and having overall just lower economic mobility and just higher barriers to labor force attachment. So that was exactly who we wanted to talk to. We felt they were underrepresented in the conversation, and really us just understanding what was happening with the economy at the time. So that's through partnerships like these, we were able to get to those workers.
That's great. And, and we went out, we did all this, 175 people later after talking to them, what did we learn? I think it was some things that we had already heard of on an anecdotal basis, but it was really nice to have that many people say similar things across so many different places and geographies, like you mentioned. So one of the things that was really key was how many complex calculations happened around work and financial security at the onset of the pandemic, right? We were all really scared. Should I continue to go to work? I need this job. I need this paycheck in order to be able to provide for myself or my family, but I'm also putting myself at risk in terms of health impacts and putting my family at risk if I'm bringing that home. So they weighed a lot of choices around employment. They thought about financial stability against those health and safety concerns. Caregiving demands were huge. We know that there was a lot put in place for essential workers during caregiving demands, but when we say essential, we're thinking more than just people who are working at the hospital or in law enforcement. We're talking about all the people who had to still show up to work in person, like the people checking out your groceries, for example, or the people dropping off your Amazon packages. And And so they had a lot of other barriers as well that were not being met by the like kind of wider movement to ensure that they were able to come in for other essential workers. So that really reflected in their comments what those mental health impacts were and the stressors that they had for their work and family lives. And they described very traumatic and scary experiences that really changed how they viewed employment and how they viewed future employment opportunities. I think it took a reset for all of us, but I think for these workers in particular, they're like, is this job worth me potentially bringing home a illness that could severely impair or even kill somebody in my family or myself? So those themes of job insecurity, financial precarity, health and safety concerns, the pandemic exacerbated barriers, the increased mental stress, that really led into what we were seeing later, which was that labor market disparities. We were seeing kind of in the data this bifurcation. So the people coming back or that were quickly back to being reemployed were the people who could work at home, perhaps, or individuals that were able to transfer their work remotely, and those without the safety net of a bachelor's degree, which Sarah mentioned, they were not benefiting from this tight labor market as much as we might have thought they were going to be able to. So in addition to taking on that fear and stress of the illness, there was also additional workloads because less people were showing up, and that meant increased burnout. You were doing work of 2 or 3 employees, but you were expected to do the work yourself. And how to find employment even in a time with significant job availability. They talked about sending hundreds of applications out and never hearing anything back, or moving forward in the process and then getting to maybe the second or final interview and hearing, oh, you didn't have the correct credentials, even though those weren't necessarily in the job description at the first, when they first applied. And even though we heard a lot about significant expanse in skills-based hiring, we weren't really seeing those kind of show up in the marketplace.
Right, and I just wanted to give a little bit of a frame to the questions that we wanted to ask and why these findings are really interesting. So we did want to know what happened at the onset of the pandemic. As many of us, and I'm sure all of us in this room, immediately became experts on Zoom. You figured out how to set up your home working situation, and were able to deal with the other kind of curveballs that the pandemic threw at us, especially if you're raising young kids or dealing with elder care, any other kind of familial circumstance. These workers did not have that. So what's really important to me from like the traumatic and scary experiences that they had is that it really did profoundly shift the way that they think about employment long term. And I think that that will have long and reverberating effects on how they do participate in the labor market. But on them not benefiting from the tight labor market conditions, we honestly had to reframe our question. We did a lot of testing to say, what are the questions that we want to ask? How do we want to solicit it in a way that we're stripping our bias and that we're getting some very real, candid insight? And we kind of came to this question like it's a foregone conclusion. Oh, employers are doing everything they possibly can to lower the barriers to get you into these roles. Isn't it great? How great has it been for you? Are you finding more jobs? Are you getting more wages? Are you having more flexibility? And we had to completely reframe the question because we even heard before we started collecting data in earnest that that was not the reality. So that to me is really critical. I think that speaks to that there's a long way to go in terms of how we can all, and it's incumbent upon us to help employers to really invest in different ways of hiring. You know, it's hard in an immediate moment to completely change what amounts to decades worth of hiring practices. That's in your DNA at this point, and it's also embedded in your applicant tracking systems and all of the things that you have built that help you to recruit and source talent. But when we're hearing, yes, I can see that a job description has been stripped of the things that I don't have, and therefore I now see myself in this role. I see how I can be competitive in it, but then still not having their candidacy move forward because they're lacking those very things that were just removed. I think it indicates that there's goodwill on behalf of employers to do things differently, but hiring is a very human process. And it's not just I send an application through and it gets to somebody's inbox and I'm going to have I'm not going to have an interview from that. We have to work with our hiring managers. We have to make these investments from the top down and the bottom up so that we can diversify the workers that we're getting into these roles, that we're really creating more economic mobility, especially when we see people that are saying, short of certain characteristics, which Jessica will talk about in a moment from a job quality perspective, I'm not going to take that role. Those roles will continue to sit unfilled if we don't think differently about the type of jobs that we're offering.
Yes, and moving on to the job quality, they really experienced enhanced expectations of what that job quality meant. And it was not just in terms of having a certain amount of pay, for example. They shifted their expectations. They started looking for higher quality employment opportunities, and how they thought about that quality was related to, did it have job stability? Was it going to be reliable? Or is this a short-term gig that, maybe it's seasonal, for example, and that wasn't really as welcoming or inviting to a lot of individuals. Were they going to be treated with a level of dignity and respect by the employer? Did they have agency in their ability at work? And did they see value in their work? So again, wages and compensation that are consistent with the living wage is very important, and they needed to be commiserate with the job responsibilities, but it also meant more than just the amount that you were receiving on your paycheck. Was there flexibility? Is there work-life balance? And they're not standalone conversations with the last thing you talk about when you're taking a job anymore was, how much am I getting paid? But what happens if someone gets sick at home and I can't send them to school, or I take public transit and I'm not going to be here exactly on time when everyone's reduced public transit service so much. So that really changed how they made decisions about whether they would take or remain in a job. And one of the quotes that I really appreciated was, they expected certain behavioral characteristics from their employer, like, can you treat me like a human and respect that I have needs outside of work? I'm no longer just a cog in the machine. I am a person with needs beyond a paycheck.
And the other thing I want to add to that, I had, because I'm in Atlanta, so we had a different conversation around this topic where we brought in some more people from the Southeast. And the head of the Goodwill in North Georgia there really talked about this in a way that I thought was super eloquent and really should help us to flip how we think about what these workers need. If you think about all of the concessions that we are given, if you're late to work a couple of days in a week, are you concerned that your job is at risk? Of course not. We have employers that give us that flexibility and give us that trust. So the knowledge class and the managerial class are extended all of these concessions that really need to be redirected to the other side of the labor market, as Jessica mentioned, this kind of bifurcation. So if we look at the dual labor market, there's people that thrive with all of the benefits and the trust, and you feel like you are respected and you get all of these, leeway that you need. But the workers that really, really need it are not given it at all. If I'm late a couple of days, then your job is just gone and you are back into the job search churn. So that's something else that we need to think about. And I think post-pandemic, it's less of job quality as something that's for others. I'll take what I get. The other quote that is in there is that, we want certain things. Before the pandemic, we took whatever was there, but now we won't. So it's really powerful to see the way that they're shifting how they not just think about it, but how they talk about it and how they behave because of it.
Yeah, one of those other behavioral changes is many workers are continuing to reinvent themselves through skills development, self-investment to change their economic opportunities. I personally have heard a lot about the amount of micro entrepreneurship or self-employment, sole proprietorships that were open during the pandemic. Individuals who worked at a restaurant and now are food vending on the side or out of their home kitchen or commercial kitchen, that they're able to start these businesses because those other opportunities went away during the pandemic and they realized that they could maybe do this on their own. And the way that they're thinking about this reinvention it's really in new and traditional ways. So it's not just going to a community college and taking some lessons for a specific credential, although that does happen, but it's also informal, it's self-directed learning. They're thinking again about how the reinvention and the additional skills will actually be a means to achieve economic opportunity. And I think that's the key piece. So there really has to be a very close tie between, if I do this for myself, I do this self-investment, I'm going to see a change in the amount of money I'm receiving as a result, or my economic future is better off because I took on that additional skills. So another thing that was really important, I think, was that they were focusing on economic mobility, both in the near term through higher paid job opportunities, but also thinking about economic stability in the long run.
Right. So my assessment of this is, and this is my takeaway, very few of the people that we talked to were saying or giving any kind of story that they were trying to climb that corporate ladder. You know, that wasn't necessarily their objective. Yes, do I want more money? Do I want to be able to live a more comfortable life? Of course. But really they were talking about, I'm investing in myself because I need to get to a stable job. So I know that a lot of us think about this all the time, but like that is so profound to me. I just need to find something that's stable. I know when I show up on a Tuesday, the job is still going to be there. I know when the 15th of the month comes, I'm going to get a paycheck. There's so many people in our labor market that don't live with that kind of stability and confidence to be able to kind of plan long term. So that's kind of how I took away from a lot of the investment that they were doing, is that I just need to be mobile right now, but ultimately my goal is to find something that I'm treated well, that pays me well, and I will be happy there. So it's just a completely different mind shift. If you would ask any of us, I'm sure some of these questions, it's, oh yeah, I'm gonna keep climbing, I gotta get to that top and highest position. They're looking for stability. So it's so foundational that, you know, we need to work towards an economy that provides that for them. And the only other thing I want to underscore there too about the different ways that they're investing in themselves, like using YouTube, using Reddit, using all of these other platforms to build their skills. How does that show up in a resume? How is that signaled to an employer? So when we talk about this investment in skills-based practices, this is a long haul discussion and long haul investment, because we need to have these signals from different places, and we need to figure out ways that we can assess those competencies or value different kind of transferability of experiences into roles that they wouldn't have thought of before, because I hope that we continue to see deflation of degrees in the labor market. You know, that was right after the Great Recession. That's where we have all these jobs that require bachelor's degrees that don't necessarily need them, because it's a filtering mechanism. And now we need to think differently about that. So
yeah, that's really important. Before we turn over to the last part, I just wanted to remind those in the room, there's note cards. If you have questions, feel free to write them down and we'll try to take them if we have time. And then on virtual, you can put them in the Q&A. Last but not least, I just wanted to think about, you know, this was the first time that the Fed really took on engaging workers. And doing it in such a intense qualitative focus group fashion. What are some lessons learned from that?
Yeah, so qualitative research. So Jessica and I, if you couldn't tell, we do not come from the economist pool at the Fed, but there's floors of economists that we have in all of our buildings. So they understand statistical analysis, quantitative analysis. Qualitative analysis is something I would say that the Federal Reserve as a whole is trying to build that muscle. And this was the first kind of systemic, approach that we took around this. How do we ethically collect this information? How do we make sure that we're being very clear about what we're going to use, what we're going to do with the information that they share with us, and how to really have like trauma-informed approaches to these conversations, because we're not saying, hey, small business, how is inflation hitting you? Or how are interest rates hitting you? We're asking people, how has your life been affected by what's been happening in the economy? So we really had to take some care to not just help them to unpack and create a safe space for them to be able to share these experiences, but also to kind of repack and to be clear with them, this is how we're going to use it. This is how we want it to influence the work that we do, how this supports our dual mandate, how we're going to use it, and not just our research, but share it back to the communities that are more directly serving you. So a lot of lessons that we took from that is that people are more than willing to share their story. We chose the modality of focus groups because it allowed some cover. So if one person is able to share, actually I became unhoused during the pandemic, and it was really hard for me to, keep everything going and try to find a job while I'm living in my car. Or my car broke down and I can't get it fixed because parts are ridiculously expensive. And now I'm transportation dependent in a city that doesn't have great transportation. Other people can jump on, oh, I had the exact same situation too. Mine was a little bit different, but yes, I can relate to your story. So it really gave this kind of exponential compounding factor to the level of candor and honesty that they were able to share in those conversations. The other piece I would say is that if any of you are out there like, oh, we want to have a better beat on the participants that we serve and have these types of conversations, please, I encourage you to do it. I really want to also encourage you to think very critically about every question that you're asking of them. There needs to be a purpose for every single word that you're using in those meetings. This is guidance that we share in the Fed a lot. We send a lot of surveys out and things like that. And I'm like, why are we asking some of these questions? If we're not doing anything with the information that we're getting back, then don't ask the question. But especially if you're talking directly with people that you want to better understand their lived experience, and they're going to be sharing some raw and real realities that they're living, you want to be absolutely sure that every single question I'm asking is for a very clear purpose, because you don't want to increase any opportunity that they are experiencing trauma from the conversation when it's just like, oh, it's interesting for us to know, but it's not really going to inform what we put out from that.
Yeah, that's really important. And I definitely think that you were so mindful of that as you went through the process. And it's just been great to see. So where can people continue to find more about worker voices?
Yeah, so like I said, we collected the data from May of 2022 to September of 2022. So keep that in mind. I think this is actually going to be a really interesting assessment long-term to get some longitudinal data. How are they faring? Because that was, in my lifetime, the hottest labor market that we've seen when we collected this intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And not all of the findings are rosy. In fact, many of the findings are, I'm still struggling significantly to find a good job to attach to the labor market. But we have 25 hours worth of data. So the initial report that's out there has these top themes that Jessica walked us through today, but we're doing a number of different kind of deeper dives into specific topics. Job quality is the first that's coming out. That will be published on September 26th. We have another report that's looking at barriers to employment. So all of these things that we've talked about, access to childcare, mental health problems, substance abuse, justice involvement, lack of transportation. So we have a better sense of how that's really standing in the way. We're also going to look at how they've been investing from a skill development perspective, entrepreneurial aspirations, and then we're going to write a brief that really looks at how did we do this process? If we're trying to really live community-based, participatory, informed research, what are the steps that we took? What did we learn? Because I know that there's been a rise in people doing this, because we all noticed when the pandemic hit, we don't have a national mechanism through which we're collecting frontline information, especially on employment realities for workers that have lower economic mobility to begin with. So we want any lesson that we've learned from the process to benefit the work that you're doing. But all of that's coming out. It's at fedcommunities.com. I'm sure it will be shared in the post-session materials, but if you go to fedcommunities.com/
.org.
Or .org, thank you. How did I do that? Of course, we're all .orgs.
Yes.
Fedcommunities.org/worker voices. That's where all of the data will be shared there. For the research nerds out there, we have the full methodology that you can take a look at and see how we kind of attacked this big qualitative research project. But please do engage with the research. I hope it underpins what you knew to be true in the communities that you're serving, but it gives you reinforcement to have more conversations that really drive impact and drive change with the partners that you work with. And if you're doing this work, we want to learn about it too. So please do reach out. My contact information's on that site. It will be circulated here. Happy to have conversations about what you're doing, what you're learning, so it can inform future work that we do on this topic, because we don't want this to be we captured it once and now we're back to just looking at lagging economic humanless data. I want this to keep going into the future. So we welcome partnerships and just love to hear what you guys are doing.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thanks.
And now I'm really excited to be able to turn over the mic to Maria Kim, President, CEO of REDF, who will bring up her panelists.
Good morning, everybody. So honored to be here. I'm going to go ahead and bring everybody up right now. This is the most attractive panel you'll see all morning. I'll give you all context for who they are, et cetera, in just a second, but we'll get settled here. This level setting that was just done by our previous panelists was perfect, because it's like they were preaching to the choir. You know, basically where Sarah ended with her analytics about the research was like, in this country, we need to reframe the narrative around talent, right? We have certain presumptions around what talent is in the private industry, and we're here to show you that lived experience is a greater proxy for talent than many of the letters you might see on a traditional resume. So we are ready to tear that paper ceiling, and we're going to dig into it. Before we do that, I just want to tell you, for context, I'd like for this to be kind of the backyard conversation. What I mean by that is we were let in the rear this morning, right, of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. That was quite an ordeal to be let in the rear. But then I thought to myself, well, hey, actually, it's your best friends that come in through the backyard of your home, right? So I want for this to be as a chill of a conversation as possible, as straight of a conversation as possible, as honest of a conversation where all the folks that are listening to us far and wide have major FOMO for not being in the room. That's the temperature that I'd like to have. And I'm joined by some fabulous leaders that are going to help us get there. Not just to my right, Patrick, who's the Executive Director of Weld Seattle, one of the preeminent employment social enterprises in Seattle, which we'll tell you all about. George, who's a Weld Works member who works for one of the social enterprises in their portfolio. We have Madeline, who is a consumer productions division manager of Downtown Women's Center in Los Angeles. And we have Amy, who's the Executive Director of Downtown Women's Center, the premier homelessness prevention provider, if I can be so bold, out of the city of Los Angeles. So honored to be here with them. And for those of you that don't know me, which is pretty much a lot of people out in the wilderness, I suppose, my name is Maria Kim. I have the honor of serving as CEO of REDF, and we are a venture philanthropy backing social enterprises all around the country. They're called employment social enterprises, and the riff on that is that they are businesses that exist to create jobs for folks who've been boxed out of the economy. Folks that Sarah and Jessica were talking about just now, folks coming out of incarceration, out of homelessness, experiencing mental health issues, opportunity youth, all the things. And we are here to kind of unpack how they are the talent that we should be betting on in the future. Yeah. So just to level set the two enterprises that are here with us today, I thought we might just describe them in a little bit more detail. So Amy, I'm going to start with you to tell us about DWC.
Thank you, Maria. Downtown Women's Center began in 1978, unfortunately, because there was a rise of women experiencing homelessness really for the first time in the nation. We responded to that need by opening up an access center in the Skid Row community of Los Angeles. 8 years later, purchasing a building next door and housing 48 women permanently in what we now call permanent supportive housing. Growing our efforts in permanent supportive housing, we had an opportunity in 2008, approached by the city to triple in size and move into a new building, but they wanted a community-facing element. And so, voila, we gave them a social enterprise that has 3 businesses: a coffee shop, a resale boutique, and an online home and gift product, soaps and candles primarily, that are now we employ 60 women that come through our programs every single year. And like you say, Maria, we help trampoline people into further opportunities by giving them a home base in all of our services, including our social enterprise.
I love that. Thank you so much. And Patrick, in Seattle, the world looks complicated too. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your experience in Seattle and what Weld is all about.
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to thank you for proving with data what I've been seeing for the past 5 years in the city of Seattle. I think the free market is only as effective as its access to equitable opportunity, and we're seeing that the similarities between Seattle and San Francisco are kind of like it's stark. There's no contrast between it. We are number 3 in the nation in homelessness. So Seattle King County area, we flip-flop with the city of San Francisco often. The unhoused or unhoused neighbors in Seattle, most of them are legal system impacted. The majority of legal system impacted are disproportionately Black and white. And we see it on a constant basis through the I-5 corridor up and down the coast. We also see essential worker shortages. We see rising housing costs. We see rising childcare costs. We see a housing shortage, and just like this perfect storm of things. So what Weld Seattle does is we have an employment social enterprise where we're actively getting people back to work, housed, holistic care, so on and so forth. But yeah, similarities are there in being in the city of San Francisco.
Can you explain a little bit more about Weld Works in specific and kind of the actual business behind it?
Yeah, of course. So Weld Seattle does 3 things. We do housing, we do community engagement, and we have an employment social enterprise, Weld Works. So we are actively working with people as the re-enter community to give them access to economic mobility. So what that looks like is individuals will come into Weld, they'll come in on a Monday, we have a mud room, they sit with us, we talk with them, we figure out what they need, where they're coming from. Our call to action is legal system impacted. So people that are affected by the legal system, returning citizens. To your point about 4-year degrees, we're now on pace. The number of 4-year degrees in this country is similar to the number of people with criminal convictions in their past. So we're working with people as they come in, and we provide life skills, we provide hard skills, we provide PPE, we provide work clothes, we provide flagger training, certificates. People come visit us on a Monday, we can get them back to work on a Wednesday sometimes because of the labor shortage. So think of a buffer organization, and like an intersection, if you will, between the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and then the people we're serving, which are people, trying to re-enter the community.
I love it. Actually, I think I'm going to move to you, Madeline, if you don't mind, and kind of bring you into the conversation and first share, why? Why are you at DWC, and what is it, the role that you believe that DWC and DWC Made is playing for the women you serve?
Why I chose Made by DWC and the Downtown Women's Center is because I had a chance to experience their services. One of the things that I want to share is homelessness among people looks very different, right? There are people who are like me who had a major life event, which ended me in homelessness. And for me, I spend a lot of my time giving back to the community wherever I lived as well. So the choice to work at Made by DWC, I came through the job training program. Branding, marketing, business building is something that I hold dear to my heart. Giving back to the community is something I hold dear to my heart. And this was the first time that I could combine my give to the community and the work that I do. This, for me, is a labor of love. It's something I'm super excited to do. I go to work every day excited. Also, for me, people development is something that I love to do as well. I believe that with any company, with any brand, with any business, your brand is the heart of your business, but your people, they're the soul. And you have to build them both. You have to be connected with them both. So for me to come in and give back and make sure that the employees that are on my team are happy. They come to work excited. They want to come to work. They want to do what they need to do. And then to work with our senior leadership and my boss on how do we improve the situation here. We all know that nonprofits pay is low, but how do we continue to improve that? You know, I was so excited to hear that our board is excited about that as well. So for me, just giving back and improving the program that I came through, you know, always thinking about how do we enhance it? How do we grow? What can I do to improve? What can I do to, you know, bring this brand and what we do to a broader community? I feel like nationwide, we should be there. How do we connect? You know, always thinking about those things.
I love that. Just so you know, Lizzo has purchased Made by WC products, so it's pretty darn dope. Amy, can I just have you to build on top of there and just tell me, is it like, I want the folks to understand that when we're working in an employment social enterprise, it is not exclusively about the job skills that we're helping folks to build. We're healing and we're building so much else. So can you unpack that a little bit more for our community?
Yes, we are, you know, market-facing, revenue-seeking business. And what I see day to day is the path towards healing that our employees are on. And it's very beautiful to watch how the job training, the real, you know, people are on our payroll. It's a real job, and how that impacts people's mental health. We're not in the business of producing baristas and candle makers, unless someone wants to continue pursuing that. One of our baristas, though, she makes a mean cup of coffee. We talk every day that I come in. I'm a coffee addict. And though she does her job very well, she speaks to how the housing component at Downtown Women's Center has helped her heal, how she feels you know, so included in the workplace and how that helps her heal. She talks about how her anger has, she calls it, she's gone from a 10 to a 2, and I don't know how she defines that, but her 2 is perfectly great in the workplace. And she's reconnected with her family. And to me, it's the whole package helped her. And now she's such an ambassador. You know, she's quoted in the LA Times. She'll speak with any guests that we bring through, and just watching that transformation and being transformed myself by it is really powerful to me. It's program first, followed by the revenue that we're generating in the economy.
Yeah, George, how might you build on that when you think about WeldWorks experience and how it fits together here?
Thanks. With WeldWorks, just like she was saying, WeldWorks is almost the same. Like myself, I've been incarcerated for a long time. USP Lompoc, USP Victorville. I've been a blood member for 40 years. When I got out of prison, I understand where it comes from, that about the economy, but Weld takes people that's coming out of prison and give them opportunity. If you put the work in, Weld will give you everything that you need to get this job. And what I've learned of me being a Weld member and one of these days a Weld staff is that with the economy, with people coming out, if you don't catch us coming right out the door and helping us get a job, there's only 2 things that you know. And either 1 is get that job, or 2, go back to what you was doing. So when you have people like for the women in their organizations or Weld and stuff like that, that are catching you coming out the door and saying, hey, listen, okay, no, you don't have no college degree and you don't have this, and you did 15, 20 years, we got a job for you. Come up here. Like Pat was saying, come Monday to the mudroom. Me, myself, I had to go through the mudroom. I went through orientation. Now I run the King County project for Weld. And it's a prevailing wage job for me and for the participants. But with them type of programs, they're helping convicted felons to get back into the workforce. So when I mean get back into the workforce, after you finish my program, one of them or a bunch of them people could be sitting in this room right now, watching this whole thing, working, maybe not working in the federal building, but working in jobs that you put side to side with average workers, working with jobs that you want that individual that went to prison to work and change his life and help you. And the biggest part about it is a lot of guys coming out of prison, and you know, a lot of people don't want to hear this, but if you used to sell drugs, you're a good salesman. If you used to take cars, you're a good mechanic. I mean, there's so many job opportunities that come in from transfer skills that you learn in prison. You know, like me, when I was in prison, I worked on the paint crew my whole time down. Then when I got out, actually through Weld, there's Weld staff member that runs a paint thing after work. I just helped him paint a house last week. You know, we learn stuff in prison that helps us out. But even if you take this stuff, like me being a project manager, before I went to prison, what I did, I was a project manager. You know, I led a crew to do what they were supposed to do. Now I'm using that between what I learned from drug dealing, what I learned from running a gang, that I can use that same skill that I've learned there to use in the job world.
Love that. We just got a lesson on transferable skills from George. But all joking aside, you know, when we think about the notion of transferable skills, like part of the mission at REDF is that we're in the business of revealing and reinforcing the talent within so many folks who've been overlooked, that the talent is already inside of us and that our job is really to unlock it and to help shift the narrative around what talent looks like in our country. The way we describe employment social enterprises are triage and trampoline. Amy used that term trampoline earlier. What do we mean by that? It's like triage. We're here to help folks kind of triage the acute barriers that are emerging, be it healing from the past trauma, be it building confidence in yourself, be it being in a practice environment where you're surrounded by a team who's got your back and wants you to thrive. Triage acute needs and trampoline to future growth. But sometimes this whole notion of an employment social enterprise, we're there to compete in the regular market, but also here to provide all the love and care that gives folks the runway to get back to work. Sometimes that can be tough to manage that kind of business, right, Patrick? So tell us a little bit about the pain points that you faced at WeldWorks. He's like sweating just thinking about it.
So we were actively trying to place people in full-time positions. That is our ambition at Weld Seattle. So that means the very best of the people we get to work with, that we see the most success with, we place them in a different enterprise. I don't think any Fortune 500 company has been built by sending their best employees out, but that is the social mission of Weld. At the same time, we operate to provide a margin for operations. So you have these dual kind of combating bottom lines you're constantly working with. I would argue that the cost is greater if you don't do that. And we see that throughout major municipalities in the country. So, I mean, this is the work, and I am honored to do it on a daily basis. I got people like George right here. Like, man, my heart will explode. And there's other people at Weld Seattle that we've given an opportunity to with these stories and these experiences. They're so valuable. Like, I mean, there's individuals I work with that have spent like 20 years incarcerated and have done such amazing things with themselves during that time and even before so, that they have such valuable life experiences that you can't get out of college, that you can't get at a retreat. And we're finding places for them to put them to work. And I say this often, but I think it's just one of the, on a daily basis, this is true to me, that our ability to foster these stories of redemption is a reflection of our collective welfare. And so every day when we walk down the street and we see people struggling, like we're dealing with compassion fatigue a little bit, you know, and that's not where we need to be as a civil society. So I think organizations like this, employment social enterprises, this is going to be an essential part of long-term success for our country, really. So I would love for the Fed to get behind it and kind of see the work we're doing. And it's tough work, and we're really grateful to be doing it.
Love that. And it actually reminds me, like, a good truism to always remember is we are not what we've done or what's been done to us. You know, we have a deeper truth, right? And so part of what we're trying to do here is to kind of convince the world that there are effectively systemic inequities that have brought many of us into these situations in the first place, such as your zip code can be the biggest predictor of your future success, or that it's 6 to 8 times more likely to be convicted of a crime if you're Black or brown than if you are white. And so let those inequities sit with each of you. And as Patrick said, like, have it fuel a bit of a fire in your belly to be like, I want to be a part of the solution that changes that for everyone. And speaking of solutions, Amy, I want to come back to you and just the challenges of homelessness in our country, both pre-pandemic and accelerated through pandemic, have just been, for lack of a better word, on fire. You know, San Francisco is suffering so deeply, Los Angeles too, Seattle too. And so DWC remains kind of a strategic antidote to homelessness because it's pairing employment with the homelessness prevention solution. So unpack that a little bit more for our friends.
We will no longer take a housing contract unless we can see the funding of how to pair it with workforce development. Most of our funding streams for housing right now don't understand the long-term needs that people need. We need more funding for long-term housing subsidies, long-term social services. That's sort of dwindling. So we've used the money that we have in what we call rapid rehousing, which is fine for those who can then move into workforce and pay for their market rate rent in 2 years. So when we choose that intervention, we will not do it unless we know that we can help people find jobs. We need both. We need both. We need what takes more time, what is more perhaps lifelong, in what you call permanent supportive housing or just deep rental subsidies, lots of supports. We need that. And you need the lighter touch, if you will, the rapid rehousing. You cannot do it without jobs. And I think social enterprises are some of the best ways to do that because we understand people's social situations and we understand what trauma-informed care looks like and how that helps people move into their next steps.
Love that, and love kind of the intersection of employment and housing that happens in your social enterprise and so many around the country. And it actually, you helped nudge me in this direction. Because we're at the Fed, I should use some data to try to back up the model. So the data shows that folks coming out of an ESE, an employment social enterprise, can demonstrate 8 years of upward income on the other side. So economic mobility that is sustained on the other side. The data in terms of homelessness to more secure housing, folks become more stably housed, order of magnitude over 250% from homelessness to more stable housing. And also we show a 66% reduction in government benefits, so reliance on government benefits. So if we've got the skeptics out there that are like, wow, it sounds cute, like they look like they're doing some good work, but what's the economic ROI? Well, there sure is. We're helping folks step off of government benefits by that amount, 66%, as one proxy towards their overall economic mobility. Not to mention, and we all know this, all the other health benefits and positive outcomes and familial reconnection and community vibrancy and all the things that happen when you step onto your new beginning, and your family and all those around you can see that too. And even with all this good juju, we're still stuck in this mess of a labor shortage and sideline talent. And you're seeing that a fair amount in Seattle, as I recall, right, Patrick? So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially in the construction industry, we'll talk to them, and they're looking for talent, or they're looking for like BIPOC talent in leadership roles. And the question I often have for people is, when is the last time you invested in somebody in an entry-level position and gave them the platform to become a leader at your organization or your company? And we don't, unfortunately, it's not something I think people have opened up their eyes to yet, but I want, me, sitting here. I wouldn't be here if that wasn't possible. 10 years ago, I'm homeless. I'm on the streets. I'm an IV drug user. In the city of Seattle, it is almost impossible to like access a first home if you come from those circumstances. I vividly remember like walking through the neighborhoods, like homeless, cold. You know what I'm saying? You look in to the houses and you see like families inside reading and playing with their little girls or Christmas or whatever. And you're just like, how is that possible? Like I didn't get the instructions for that. And someone took a shot on me. You know what I mean? I was able to clean up my life. I got sober. I lived in transitional sober living. I did all the things. And there was a woman, Amy King, and she was like, yo, I'm starting this nonprofit. And I think you're supposed to work there. And, she invested in me. And then through that, I've been able to invest in others. And, today we put $3 million into the pockets the past 3 years of people facing housing insecurity. We're housing, since I think we're approaching 100,000 nights of shelter since we started. And these are peer-led solutions. They're pragmatic, they're practical, we're actively giving back. And this is because of employment source enterprises, investing in people closest to the problem, believing that there is a solution out there. But like true freedom and true like prosperity is not possible without access to economic mobility. So we need that as an essential component and lessening recidivism, lessening homelessness, like all the things. I read some last night. It said the aggregate cost of incarceration in this country annually is $1 trillion when you factor in everything. That's 6% of our GDP. I mean, it's absurd. So I think that things like we're doing are not only important, but I really think they're essential, especially in big cities, essential for public safety, for our kids, for all the work we're doing.
Love it. As we round out, I'm going to come at each of you for like a lightning round, rapid fire piece of wisdom for the people. So we're here to tell you that this model is a good one, that it sticks, that it's here to stay, that it's filling a gap that's so critical. And it's not going to fix all the things, right? Together, these enterprises are creating some critical mass in our country. They've, since our inception, have earned over $2 billion in earned revenue, and have brought over 100,000 people facing these tough barriers to employment back to work. But the order of magnitude of the challenge is huge, 10 million at least that are facing these barriers. And so we need all the help of all the sectors, public, private, and purpose, to come together to help this population get back to pathways of economic mobility. So with that as kind of our closing notion, I'm going to do rapid fire on any last words of wisdom for these fine people. I'll start with you, Amy.
Oh, you could just, go to downtownwomencenter.org and buy a candle that Madeline's team has helped produce and spread the word. That's one nugget of wisdom I have. But, think about social enterprises first. If you're hiring, think about orgs like Weld and, who do employment placement. Where can we be a part of your efforts too?
Madeline?
For me, I would say, as you're looking to hire, think about what's important, right? Skills, you can always teach. The biggest thing to think about is transferable skills. Do you need somebody that's been entrenched in your industry, or do you need somebody who's going to come and be creative? If they're a go-getter, if they got knowledge, if they know how to motivate others, if they are motivated, you can teach them the skills to work in your industry. You can't teach those intrinsic things that they will come with and be the best employee that you have. I learned years ago that, people who drop out of high school or drop out of school, they're not dumb. They're some of the most smart people that you will ever meet. They drop out because they're not being challenged, but then they go on to do other things. And sometimes they're harmful, sometimes they're great, but focus on what they can bring to you and create just an amazing team. I'm gonna drop this one more thing. If you think about it, TNT is one of the most dangerous things to have around, right? But if you treat it properly, it's in a stable situation, it could be the biggest asset that you have. Think about that with your team. When you treat them properly, they're your biggest asset. When you don't, they're just as dangerous as TNT.
Dang, George.
I don't even know if I can add to that, but that's pretty good. Real quick, I'd say this. No matter something that we've learned, and you see right here, if Pat didn't tell you his past, none of you guys would have known that. And so you have people that's coming out of incarceration, even homeless people. I mean, we have people at Seattle Weld, Seattle Works, Seattle Housing, from the penitentiary, from housing, from being homeless. And you would never know it because they have came up and worked side by side and you would never know their past. Real quick thing, Shauna Williams, my wife, she, to share with you guys, she was in the penitentiary, not in the penitentiary, CTAC. She was a banker, made a mistake, did her time, came out, the judge said, you'll never work around that stuff again. Now she's at the head of HR of her company. For the last 8 years. Myself, I just got done doing 15 years Fed time. I've been out since 2015 and ain't looked back. I've been with Weld. I've sat, talked to Jay Inslee before. I've done everything there is to do to try to help change not only the economy, but change Seattle. And when we say change Seattle, like Pat said, Seattle, Frisco, LA, we're all the same. If you look in the thing, it switches every day. One day Seattle's the worst, one day LA's the worst, and Frisco. Only thing that I can tell you guys is if you start being more open-minded about individuals, that individual might show you that they can be somebody in your company to help you move forward.
Love it. Patrick?
I just really want to thank everyone for inviting me into a federal bank. I think it is, this is crazy. So Jay Pershing runs Weld Works. He likes to say, we replace barriers with opportunities. And really when you're doing this work, consider that. Like you guys are the shot callers of this, you know what I mean? Like what are the barriers and can we replace those with opportunities for people? Because I think we were talking about this yesterday, way more interested in solutions than grievances. That's just where we got to come from. People are always watching us. Like we got to be extra impeccable with our word because people were like, what? Almost maybe, waiting for us to fail or waiting for us to mess up. So we're doing all this work for the people behind us too. But really when you sit down and do this work from this bank or whatever bank you're at, like look at the barriers. Like, is there an opportunity in here for someone if we make a switch here? And how are we actually looking at this? Because like he just said, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know if I hadn't just told you that or we hadn't shared our past. We are active members of the community giving back. I am a homeowner today. I'm a father today. I'm a husband today. I wasn't that 10 years ago. Thank you.
That's where we're going to drop the mic right there. Let's give everybody a round of applause. Awesome. Going to pass the baton to Carla Javits, Senior Advisor and immediate past CEO of REDF. Right on.
Okay, and please, my panel come up. I'm going to vie with Maria here. I think she started by saying her panel was going to have the best look. And, no. All right. And then I also wanted to mention you do have cards on your tables, and everybody who's online can send in questions on the chat. So if you have questions, I think this is a real good panel to ask some questions of, because we're going to talk about kind of scaling up a lot of the exciting work that you just heard about. We gave sort of a provocative title to this panel, and the title is Fixing Work, Not the Worker. And I think, look, the point of that is employers need to be investing in a whole new way of sourcing talent, and they need to be investing in the workforce that they have. And what you just heard about employment social enterprise is that these are some of the most exemplary employers in the country that I think really fulfill a lot of the expectations or the desires that workers have that you heard about on the first panel. And then we've got the data, as Maria said. We know we've got a social return on investment from all the things she added up of $2.23 for every dollar spent. We know we have higher employment. We know we have higher income. We know we have more stability, which, again, you heard earlier, is really what workers want, what workers need. And at a human level, we're talking about fathers, mothers, sons, daughters who can shine at work, who can share their talents, who are respected at work and in the community. Again, what we heard from all the data is what, working people, what all of us really want. So this is an incredibly exciting approach. We've got a lot of evidence that it works. It's hard to do, but it's growing. In order to do more, and we need to do more, at the very, very start, we heard there are 10 million people in this country who could benefit from this approach. So how are we going to get there? We're very proud that our field has gotten to about 100,000 people employed, about $2 billion of revenue. That's incredible, but we have to do even more if we're really going to take this up to scale. It requires partnership, and it requires partnership across sectors to build up things that are promising and that are evidence-backed. It takes risk takers. It requires innovators. This is not for the faint of heart. It crosses sectors, workforce, economic development, even the justice system, homelessness, housing. This is about a lot of different things, and so it can be hard to scale up. So we're very, very, very lucky today to have leaders of private and corporate philanthropy and government to kind of reveal how do they think about this? Why are they individually investing in this? And what kind of partnerships do they envision? Do they take part in now that are going to really allow this to scale up? It's a meaningful way to achieve your own institution's objectives, but then, of course, it has kind of broader societal implications, and we want to really engage you in conversation about that. And it is very exciting to be here at the Fed. We're not going to steal all the money, although we wish we could. but the Fed is really unique, and we're very glad and grateful to be partnering today because they really care about both the larger economy in terms of business and also the workforce. And they make both of those pillars an important part of their work, and that's really what this is all about. I'll just introduce very, very briefly. We have Director Gray here, who heads up the State of California's Office of the Small Business Advocate. I have to confess, until I met Director Gray, I didn't know we had an Office of the Small Business Advocate, and it's a very powerful position. And they're leading California Rise, which is the first large-scale investment in the United States in employment social enterprise. So we're really lucky to have your leadership. Director Gray has put her heart and soul into this work and really cares deeply. It's been a privilege to get to know you. We have Leslie Payne, who I've known for some time, who leads path-breaking initiatives for the Irvine Foundation that focus on making the economy work for all Californians, not just some Californians, with a real focus on especially low-wage workers. Very unique for a foundation. Leslie's been doing that for a long time. And then Jimena Delgado, a longtime friend with Bank of America Charitable Foundation, where she leads, this huge and influential institution's national portfolio around youth development, and has been deeply dedicated to employment social enterprise also for a very long time. So small business, low-wage workers, financial institutions, fixing work has implications across multiple sectors. So I'd appreciate it if you think, the audience thinks as you listen, why are these different institutions excited about and investing here? And what might that mean for your own work? And how can you encourage, the sectors and the places where you work every day to get more excited about this? Because really the biggest problem we have in scaling this up is that it's very little known. It's kind of a wonky term, and it's just a relatively unknown. We have all these employers and businesses in this country that are really leaning in to do this fantastic work, and should be, I think, the exemplars of what employers are all about in the future, and I think will be, really are that North Star. So I'd love to start with you, Leslie, and just, so why does the Irvine Foundation focus on making our economy better for low-wage workers? It is really unusual for a foundation. Why are you on this path? What's worked? What hasn't worked? I know you did your own worker voice survey. Perhaps that plays in. And, how do your investments in this sector fit? Yeah.
For the opportunity. There we go. So why do we do this work? We did because we asked Californians what they wanted, and this is what we heard. When Don Howard, our current president and CEO, took over in 2015, he did a listening tour largely of grass tops, leaders and folks within the state, just asking what are the most pressing challenges facing California, and again, the just economic mobility, how difficult it is to sort of make a go of it in this state came up. And so and just how many folks were working full time, over the years, our analysis has gotten much more nuanced, but at the time it really focused on, working full time, even more than full time, 1 or 2 jobs, 3 or 4 jobs, and still not being able to make ends meet. So that set us on this path. The path was really deepened by doing our own listening to low wage workers. And we had many takeaways from that. A lot of them are really similar with those that came out of the Fed research. But the thing that really stuck was just how often people had to make unfair trade-offs in their life. That again, stability was the goal. Not, it wasn't about owning your 5th car. It was about, like a sufficient intake of insulin. Not having to ration yourself on these things that are just very basic in order to survive. And so that set us on this path. We've been at it, since 2015, sort of more in earnest in 2018, where we launched our first 2 initiatives in this area, Better Careers, which is our workforce development initiative, which is what I work on, and Fair Work, which is a worker organizing initiative. And we see those as really dual goals that, and we've since defined our North Star to be a California where all low-wage workers have the power to advance economically. And for us, marrying power and economic opportunity is really important. You can't have one without the other. And one of the reasons why work is so broken is because of the lack of worker power. And in the years since, we've complemented those 2 with priority communities, an initiative focused on worker-driven economic development, and Just Prosperity, which is our statewide policy team. And I think in the question you sent me over email, you asked, what's something that you've learned, or something that surprised you? And it wasn't a setup. We didn't talk about this, but the thing that has been the biggest lesson and the biggest surprise within Better Careers, the Workforce Development Initiative, is how flawed it was for us to endeavor to change employer behavior. When Better Careers launched, we were so very economic. We had supply side, we had demand side, and we had financing. And it is true that you need to think about demand, of course. But focusing on changing employer behavior, especially as a philanthropy, we did not make much progress. And there's exceptions to every rule. The work that Opportunity at Work is doing around tear the paper ceiling and reducing degree requirements is absolutely necessary. But asking nonprofits, the same folks who go to employers for placements, to also demand that employers change their behavior, it's really a tough dynamic. And so, as we went down that path of thinking about demand, we sort of ended up with
two really viable options. And again, there are exceptions to this rule. There are some amazing nonprofit organizations that do training and placement that are changing employer behavior. But at any kind of scale, you're left with two options: employment social enterprise and co-ops, which is my tee up to the Office of the Small Business Advocate, because you've done such amazing work encouraging both. But yeah, for us, employment social enterprises are the place where we don't need to talk about what's broken about work, where we don't need to, there is still a conversation about like long-term job quality and making sure that in the case where jobs are intended to be transitions, that they do transition to quality jobs. That is hard work. But you're not, reminding people that, this human is more than just their labor market participation, that they are human, and that there needs to be justice at the core of the work that we do. Like, so much of workforce can become building a better bootstrap and incredibly technocratic and sort of use the exceptional stories that we can all tell at galas of folks that drove 2 hours each way to participate in, a 3-week training program and then landed the job at Apple. And sure, but I've never gotten a job at Apple, and I've been served really well by multiple systems. And like, that's the other piece that I'd love to complicate in this conversation. It is true that individuals have barriers, and individuals have been failed by multiple systems. Education, criminal justice, healthcare, transportation, immigration, all these systems are not equipped right now to sort of meet the complexity of our economy, let alone the profound injustice on which this country was built, especially with regard to labor. We were built by unpaid labor. We continue to rely on underpaid labor. And to undo all that, we're gonna need some new models. So that's part of why we're so excited about social enterprise, is because it both participates in the economy, but breaks the thing that needs to be broken about what the role of humans are.
Yeah, so as a society, we're creating the problems that then we're trying to fix, I think, is essentially, yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think one thing, I didn't know if you were going to go there with your comment, was, not working at Apple. Like, one thing that we've really been struck by is a lot of workforce initiatives tend to focus on, the Fortune 500. Can we get them to, hire people and change their practices and invest in talent, et cetera, et cetera. And yet what we see is that the small business community is largely the main employer of folks at the local level, and certainly the people that we care so much about. So I think far too little attention is paid to how to support and enable. And in many cases, the small business community is hungry for the support to do this work better. But often they don't get it because they don't have the level of resources or HR, et cetera, et cetera. So Director Gray, I was just curious if you might speak a little bit about, you have a very broad and obviously critical mission around supporting the small business sector in California. And we're just curious, how does employment social enterprise fit into that? Because it's still very unusual to see a small business entity at the state level that's really embracing the significance of that. And we've had a lot of discussions about this, and I've just been struck by your hunger to learn more about this ecosystem and how it does fit. So I think the audience would find it really interesting. How do you see it fit? And then, kind of maybe a little bit about California Rise and your aspirations for that.
So good morning, everyone. And thank you, Carla, for having me, and Maria for having me a part of this discussion today. And I think that you characterized my feelings about this absolutely correctly. I am hungry, and I'm hungry for a solution to what I see as both an economic problem, but also a human condition problem. Most of us walking down the street, if we saw someone fall, we would instantly move to help them up. But we don't do that when people have problems or an accident that we can't visibly see. And some of the panelists on the previous panel had those kinds of injuries, right? And I call them injuries because I think that injuries can be healed. And I think that ultimately the human condition can be changed. So I see that part. Maria said we have deeper issues here. I think if we drill for the deeper issues, we get beautiful byproducts, which happen to enrich our neighborhoods, our communities, and ultimately our economy. So I'm excited about RISE. And by the way, today is a very big day for this program because we went live today, right? Yes. It is indeed the first program of its kind. And we estimate right now we've got about 200 ESEs operating and employing about 10,000 folks. And we want to see those numbers go up. I often say relative to small businesses that it's a crime to give them money without technical assistance. I see ESEs as businesses. When I ran a nonprofit, I used to tell my staff, nonprofit is a tax status. It is not a state of mind. There you go. So we need to operate this like we operate any other business. We need to bring a return on our investment. We need to build up our people. We need to develop human capital because that's the capital that goes out into the neighborhoods, right, where our businesses and our communities are. I also say that businesses are often the place where our young people get their first job, where folks have had a stumble or a struggle with the law, they get their second chance. And we've got to preserve that at a minimum. I prefer to elevate it. And that is the reason why we are so excited about California RISE, is because it's an opportunity to elevate this sector. A couple of real quick tidbits you guys may or may not know. Relative to the economy, our small businesses provide 2/3 of all net new jobs, right? 50% of our small businesses are operating from home. So housing becomes a very important issue for business operation. And our small businesses are providing 50%, right at 50% of all private sector jobs. So what we learned in the pandemic, right, was that small businesses were an integral part of our communities across the state. And so it makes sense to marry the small business habits and mentality and ability to disrupt and to drive innovation. It makes sense to marry that with social responsibility. And most of us, when it comes to anything that starts with social, before 5, most of us doing economic development work aren't thinking about it. We think that something that starts with social is after 5. We want to change that. And we want to make it not only acceptable, but we want to make it preferable to think about the socioeconomic impacts of our work and the social imprint in our communities of said work. So there's my hunger.
Very exciting. Can I just, one quick follow-up? I'm just curious, since this is the first in the country, and obviously things that happen in California can have a lot of resonance elsewhere. I'm just curious, is there something you might highlight that you'd like to learn as you launch off on this kind of CA Rise experiment. There's going to be millions of dollars flowing for the very first time from state government to employment social enterprises in California. I know we've talked about some organizations, some employers may be doing some of this, but how much of this are they really doing, or is there a model here, or better practices? I don't know. I'm just curious, like, what are you hoping to learn as this launches?
Well, I'm hoping to see some standardization, right? I'm hoping to see models that can be replicated. I'm a fan of regionalism. I'm a fan of, not reinventing the wheel. And I'm hoping that this project, the funding and the technical assistance will really give birth to a portion of our economy that we can fully respect, because they're gonna look like other areas. We're going to have standardization. We're going to have standard expectations. And I think that is perhaps the most significant piece of the technical assistance, and why REDF's role is so significant in this project, because you all have been doing this and garnering this research for such a long time, that we're really looking to your leadership and your expertise to make social enterprises across the state look similar. And I say this about small businesses that operate outside of the fray, that we hope to legitimize them. Not that they don't exist, not that they aren't important, but when you create standard models and you legitimize those models and you bring them mainstream, other people who've been looking at that but afraid to get over in that area, they can see themselves in that. They can find their place, and they can then build for their community, their business, their organization, what they see operating successfully someplace else. And that's why representation matters. Okay, I'm probably going on a little too long. This will be my last thing I'll say about this, but this is why representation is important. Maria, you talked earlier about BIPOC folks. Representation is important when it comes to creating models for this kind of work as well. It's important for every Californian to be able to see themselves represented in this model.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, one of my pet peeves, which you're seeing the opposite of here, is that when you hear policy, investor kind of panels like this, they stay way up here. But what you're speaking to is how do you implement? And we're lucky at REDF. Maria came from actually running a terrific social enterprise. And then as you heard from her panel members, we are all about tapping the knowledge. I always say REDF's been a little bit of a Johnny Appleseed, because we just tap the knowledge base of all the people who are doing the work, and we try to help them bring that knowledge and information to one another. Jimena, I just wanted to turn to you, because the partnership with banks and with the corporate community is essential, I think, in trying to take this model to scale. Bank of America has been a huge supporter for so long. How do you think about that? Why would an institution like Bank of America invest in this arena? And then, how do you look at partnership, I guess, in the context of the work you're trying to do?
Sure, it's really hard to follow when you're going live today. So first of all, I appreciate the invitation to be here and just to listen, really. I wear a national hat. Right? Although I live here in San Francisco, so I'm a Californian. So I'm glad that I'm sort of being pulled back to learn a little bit more, because we've been doing this work for such a long time, but I don't think that we refer it to as ESCs or supporting ESCs. So I think that there needs to be more of an education and getting people comfortable. I was telling somebody, I know I'm going off topic right now, but I was talking to somebody about talking to our small business folks about CDFIs way back when. And now they're reciting CDFIs as, you know, their best partners. And so it's getting comfortable with things that you don't know a lot about. And so coming back to Bank of America, we're a, you know, a global company. Most of our business is here in the United States. And so we have about 93 plus markets. Like I said, I work at a national level. We build a strategy at a national level, but it's really upon those local markets to build their own strategy because we want to be of value to the community, right? We want to resonate and we want to be part of the economy, right? We can't be doing one-offs and not, you know, it has to make sense to the people that we're serving, the people that we're trying to do business with. And so at a higher level, at a national level, we look at 4 strategies. One is in jobs, which I am part of, another one on housing, another one on small business resiliency, and now brand new to us because, for obvious reasons, health. And so in each one of those, we have people that lead the pieces of that. Plus, we also work with our local market to make sense of it all, right? Because at a national level, you're not really seeing the impact. It's local where you're going to see the impact. And so we really, we build it out at the national level, but it's for the local folks to really see the impact and measure impact. And so under jobs, which I am part of, Carla mentioned that I do youth development. I not only do youth development, but also I look at under academic partnerships, student support. And I also do barriers to employment. So the way that we're looking at our job strategy is sort of this bridge. We start with young people as young as 16, right, high schoolers, and up to 24. So that's youth development for us. And we have a robust summer youth employment program. And we work with organizations that are really helping us with that first time work experience, which is very, very, very important, right? To make sure that young people are being successful in their lives. Then we do alternative routes to training, right? And that's the Goodwills of the world, right? Because not everybody's going to go off to college, get a 4-year degree, and go, you know, be employed. Beyond that, we also have academic partnerships. We have found that this is a good opportunity for us as an employer, as a philanthropist, to be involved, right? Young people are going to get their degrees, but they're not finding jobs. Why is that, right? So that's why we started, and especially students of color, both Native American, Black and Latinos are finding it very hard. And we saw that most acutely through the pandemic. Beyond that, then it goes to me in barriers to employment. And that's a new portfolio for me. And so I am so glad that I'm here because I'm going to be emailing you and we're going to set up a conversation because I really need to fully understand ESCs, right? Because I want to be meaningful in me being a steward of the funding that we get to partner with nonprofit organizations, right? And so I want it to be of value, I want it to be meaningful. And so when we look at barriers to employment, it's really 3-pronged. One, we're looking at people with disabilities for obvious reasons. Second, we're looking at returning citizens. And then thirdly is immigrants or refugees. And so when we talk about ESCs and the importance, you know, for us, it really is a bifurcation in terms of jobs and small business resiliency. So you're going to get a call from 2 people because, you know, we got to wear those 2 hats. So partnerships for us are very, very important. I don't know, I think REDF, we've partnered with you all for the longest time.
Dozen years.
Something like that. I've been with the bank for 25 and partnerships are just so very important. Collaboration, long-term, and sometimes we get impatient as funders, but hang in with us because data for us is important, impact is important for us, and now more than ever, we're really looking at the impact of the, you know, coming off of the I can't even say it, the pandemic, because we're still feeling the, the effects of that in our BIPOC communities. And I think you wanted me to say something else.
I think
Okay.
that's great. I mean, it's a very holistic perspective, and honestly, I could talk to the three of you all the rest of the day, and I wish we could. But as I understand it, I think we're going to have to wrap it up. I just want to thank you all. I want to thank you for your partnership with your vision to get excited and excite others about this growing and exciting field. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Thanks to the Fed. Thank you.